Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Glad you are here. Um, Glad to be having the privilege of sitting in a safe space today. Um, Being able to address whoever shows up to listen to this. That's a privilege I'm aware that I have right now. So I'm going to offer a few remarks today. I'm calling this talk "Zen is not a self-improvement project." Um, this is a theme that if you've heard any kind of Uh, Zen talks in the past, is a pretty common one. It's certainly something I've spoken to before in various different ways, usually as a subset of something else. So I thought I'd give it a little more direct airtime today. It's on my mind right now because, well, a bunch of reasons, but primarily because I've taken a few new clients on recently as as a spiritual director, and so I've taken on a couple of new directees. And at the beginning of the work, beginning of spiritual inquiry, all of us, without exception, all of us are seeing the spiritual path, spiritual teachings, spiritual work through an egoic lens, an ego-based lens, the lens of the small self, which makes sense. That's our operating system. Most of us, most of the time, right? So it makes sense when we take up an interest in Zen practice, take up an interest in um, meditation, take up an interest in any kind of self-awareness project, especially a self-transcendent awareness project, that's the part of us that shows up, the ego self, right? It's first half of life conditioning, first half of life meaning ego-based, self-focused self, right? Makes sense. So no criticism here. No criticism at all. It's not a judgment. It's just an awareness when people are new. All of us, again, this includes all of us. We tend to think of spiritual work in terms of what we're going to get. Right? It makes sense. Our normal way of encountering anything, actually, is in terms of what we're going to get. As our self-awareness increases, as our mind begins to still, as we begin to see more deeply into the life we're leading and what actually motivates us, we see the truth of that. Um, and that can be actually kind of a humbling. That's kind of a humbling stage um, for all of us to sort of see what I'm in relationship with in every moment of my day is I'm in relationship with something I imagine I'm going to get from whatever it is I'm doing. The sandwich I'm making, the job I'm applying for, the person I'm talking to, the activity I'm engaged in is really always a transaction because this is ego functioning and this is how ego functioning works. So again, nothing wrong. This is not a bad thing. It's just that's how ego functions, and ego self is how we function 90% of the population, 90% of the time. What am I going to get from this phone call? What am I going to get out of you? What am I going to get from this Dharma talk? What am I going to get from this meditation period? What am I going to get from studying this scripture? What am I going to get from this sandwich? What am I going to get from this TV show? Everything. I mean, if you really pay attention, just the mundane day-to-day workings of your life, you'll see from an ego level, you are always in relationship with trying to get something. I'm trying to get a need met. I'm trying to have something happen. I'm wanting something. So everything is seen as an exchange. Everything is seen as a transaction. Every relationship between self and other is regarded as transactional, right? So again, not a bad thing, but something that's very, very important to see. So when I'm working with people who are new, and I don't know what new means in this context, first 10 years of practice, first 30 years of practice, first 60 years of practice, first 50 lifetimes of practice. I don't know. I don't know. That's okay. Doesn't matter. At the beginning of practice, the first half of practice, this is the norm. I'm advancing a small self toward a practice and trying to get something. So people come to meditation. I'm sure you know this, to try to get something. I want peace. I want stillness. I want a greater sense of concentration. I want increased focus so I can better concentrate on my job, on my golf game, on my novel that I'm writing. I want to have less of a temper so I get along better with my family. Whatever. right? Important to recognize, a very important step. We cannot sidestep this phase of our development, and the phase lasts a long time, right? Advancing the small self toward enlightenment is what we might say in Zen. And so we're trying to get needs met, and it's important to recognize. And at some point, when the path continues far enough, or the teacher is honest enough, or the insight is deep enough, or something happens, there's a change. There's a very, very big shift in the center of gravity of the self. There's a very, very big shift for those of us who are fortunate to different perspective. We begin to relate to the small self, relate to the ego self, relate to the human self, a bunch of different words for this, instead of being identified with that small self, ego self, human self. Very different shift. So what I want to talk about today, the way I want to talk about this is by using Maslow's hierarchy, right? Most of us know Maslow, Abraham Maslow, and his famous hierarchy of needs. And he arranged it in the form of a pyramid, which I will now put up on the screen for those of you who are watching the video. For those of you who are just listening to this audio, I'll describe it to you really quickly. It's the pyramid that we probably have seen at some point in our life. We have a pyramid that's broken down into 5 sections that he called values. And from the bottom to the top, going from the physical needs to the ego needs to the higher order, what we call higher order needs, we have at the very bottom, the base of the pyramid, we have physiological needs. This is just about survival. Air, water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing, reproduction. Food, clothing, shelter, medicine, as Buddha said. But you can see that this is the mammal. This is about the mammal, the animal staying alive. Right? So we share these basically with other life forms, so certainly other mammal life forms. Food, clothing, shelter, medicine. Just stay alive. How does the animal stay alive, right? Then we move up a tier and we get to safety needs, personal security, employment, resources, health, property. You can see we're moving up a little bit, right? And these are starting to take a more human Homo sapiens type form because employment gives us access to currency, and currency can be used in exchange for goods and services to help meet physiological needs, right? So you can see some of this stuff is now starting to be unique to human beings. Personal security, belonging is next, but you can feel we're somewhere in between personal security being about I'm safe as I close my eyes tonight, that I will not be killed in my sleep. But we're also starting to work our way toward a sense of relationship with our fellow humans, right? So that third tier now, moving up as an extension of safety, is what Maslow called love and belonging. This is the center of the 3, or of the center of the 5 tiers, right? The middle tier, love and belonging, friendship, intimacy, family, sense of connection. This is safety within the tribe, acceptance, right? Here, just as a side note, love and belonging are Maslow's words. That means small L love, the way we would talk about it in a spiritual setting. Just fondness and inclusion kind of love, right? Not capital L, transcendent love. We're not talking about spiritual love. We're talking about, human love, right? So love and belonging. Going up one more tier, second from the top now. Tier number 4, value number 4, as Maslow said, esteem. Now we're really safely within the realm of ego. These are not functions that our fellow mammals have, at least not to the degree that they're present in Homo sapiens. This is respect, self-esteem, status, recognition, strength, freedom. This is power and efficacy, mastery, all those kinds of things are in this category. And it's about not only social belonging, but you can feel here there's a huge identification with worth, social worth, right? Importance, fame. the search for value. Okay, I know this makes sense to all of you. And then finally, at the end, at the very, very top of the little pyramid, we have what he called self-actualization. We're going to use the small s, self. Today, for the sake of this talk, there is a hint, depending on how we're talking about Maslow, that this is the point where the spiritual life may begin, because self-actualization might, on purpose or by accident, lead to self-witnessing, which becomes self-transcendence, which becomes a very different project. And that's kind of what we're playing with today. But for now, let's stick with ego-based, human-based self-actualization. This is, I want to achieve. I want to be really good at the stuff that I do. I don't want to just be an average member. I want to be an extraordinary member. I want to be really, really good. Yes, this can be tied to the need for status and recognition, all that kind of stuff, but it's also a little higher order in that it is primarily related to how one views one's self, as opposed to how one is viewed by the tribe. Right? The activity may be the same. The thing that we do or the role that we play might still be the same. The life we lead might still be the same behaviorally, but this is more of how the self regards itself. I was a good man. I was loyal. I lived a good life. I was a faithful husband and a competent hard worker and a good flute player or whatever. Okay. Do we have all five? One more time from the bottom. Physiological needs, this is just staying alive, is number one. Number two, safety, security, employment, resources, health, this kind of stuff, safety. Number three, belonging, friendship, intimacy, love, family, connection. Number four, esteem, recognition, value, status, respect, strength, freedom. And then finally, self-actualization. This is positive self-regard in its highest form, the desire to fulfill the self the best it can be, right? Okay, I'll take it off the screen now for those of you who are seeing it. There we go. And so what are we talking about here? We're talking about, and it's a very skillful map. I love Maslow, and I think this map has stood the test of time. As a spiritual practitioner, it's been endlessly useful for me to self-observe and ask myself the question we kind of started with today, which is, what need am I trying to fulfill right now? Which one of the five categories is the activity that I am engaged in fitting into? And can I also observe the storyline that goes along with being in that tier? Can I name the need I'm trying to meet? Even can I feel the feelings, the emotions that arise around the need being met or the need being thwarted, right? Am I being held in positive esteem by the people who are around me? Or am I noticing I'm not fitting into the group? What kind of thoughts do I have around that? How does it feel to be that? And to go one step further, as I was taught to help bring karma into view, to bring my conditioning, my egoic conditioning into view, to ask myself questions like, how has my past, how has my previous social, religious, family, cultural conditioning led me to think, feel, believe the way that I think, feel, and believe, right? Getting very intimate with the karmic self, the small self, the ego self. So thank you, Maslow. This is an incredibly powerful tool. What a beautiful tool. This is essentially a very rough, very high level map of normal human function, right? Normal human functioning, transactional, conditional, based in the small self trying to get its needs met, whether they're physiological or safety or belonging, right? No matter where I am on that, it is still the small self advancing itself into the world externally to try to get basic ego human needs met. That's what that is, right? So this is 90% of the population of this planet, human population of this planet. 90% of the time, this is the norm, right? Pay attention to that. Notice it in yourself. Notice it in your community. Notice it on the TV. Notice it in the news. Notice it in your family. When you're sitting around the table, this is a fantastic meditation practice, because the person you're sitting around having dinner with is telling you a story about their day, and they're telling you a story that's attached to a narrative they have, that's an expression of a feeling that they're having, that's about a need that they were trying to meet, that they were either successful, they imagine, in meeting, or unsuccessful they imagine in meeting. And even though they're not using any of those words, most probably, if you become a skilled listener, you can see, oh, that's what they're thinking. That's what they're believing. That's what they're feeling. That's the need they're trying to get met. That's where they are. Wow, it's a powerful tool. Don't you think it's a powerful tool for connection between human functioning? Really, 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 really powerful. And so when people begin spiritual work, whether it's in a Zen setting or a secular mindfulness setting or in any other religious setting, actually, it doesn't really matter. This is the self that advances, that gets you in the door of the church, gets you in the door of the synagogue, walks you into the mosque, or walks you into the zendo. This is what brings you into the therapist's office. This is what brings you to the pew. This is what brings you to the meditation cushion, right? An attempt to meet some of these needs. Meditation and spiritual practice is usually an attempt to meet higher order needs, closer to the top there. But it's also fair to say religious expression of spiritual tradition, right? The religious community, religious tradition also meet needs in all five tiers. We go to church to belong. We go to church because there's a food shelter, or there's a shelter, and there's a food shelf in the basement, right? Wow. I go there for my AA meeting. I go there to whatever it is. I go there for a whole bunch of reasons. People go to these spiritual settings and religious settings for a whole bunch of different reasons. All five of Maslow's values, he calls these five categories values. All five are addressed to at least some degree by religious traditions. So we're paying attention to ourselves as we're advancing toward practice and we're beginning to ask really big questions. And at some point, some of us move to a different center of gravity. As I said a few minutes ago, we begin to see that the marrow, the heart of the tradition isn't about any of those five things at all. In fact, the heart, the lifeblood, the fire, the spirit of every spiritual tradition ultimately asks us to sacrifice all five of those values, because those are human values and ego values, and they all must be at some point relinquished, renounced, sacrificed. I'm pausing because you can kind of feel this is when it stops being fun. When people are engaged with spiritual practice and they can see that they are improving, you can tell where their center of gravity is. Again, there's no criticism in any of this. This is not criticism. This is a stage of development. I'm getting better at my meditation. I'm noticing fewer thoughts. My body's less restless. I feel calm and centered at the end of my half hour sitting when the bell goes off. That's wonderful. That's more than wonderful. That's crucial. That's a stage of development that we can't get around. It's really, that's wonderful. When I go to church, our new church is wonderful. The pastor is welcoming, right? The theology of the community seems to be really progressive. It's very inclusive. They do a lot of social activism. They raise a lot of money for charity. They gather a bunch of food during their food drive for the poor. That's fabulous. There is nothing but affirmation of all of that. Those are the five tiers, right? Those are the five values that Maslow is describing. Those are very, very important. We don't ever ignore them. But the heart of the tradition, the heart of the mystical experience that gives rise to a religion, is eventually to no longer be identified with any of them. To no longer be identified with any of them. And that's when it stops being fun. It starts being something much, much, much better than fun, much bigger than fun. Stops even being defined by words like fun. But when we look really, really carefully in the stillest parts of ourselves, at the idea of all five, if we use our imagination, all five tiers of Maslow's hierarchy within ourselves being fulfilled, all those tiers of needs being met. Use your imagination. Let's say you have all those things. You're alive and safe, and you've got a loving community and a loving family, and people think well of you, and you're really good at what you do. Then what? I hope you can feel, I'm guessing because you're choosing to listen to this talk, I'm guessing you can feel that that starts being actually quite small. Not bad, not a problem. It's nothing to eliminate, but it is something to understand. Oh, that's as far as that goes. Like that's as far as that goes. And that none of them are worth living for. That's not worth living for in its most fundamental sense. She worked really hard. She was really, really prudent. She saved her money. She died with a really big bank account, and all of her friends thought she was great. Is that a life worth living for? I mean, actual living for. Is that a life worth living for? Or is that just a task competently completed? A very, very small task. What I'm saying is, by definition, spiritual life recognizes the ego isn't worth living for. That's not the purpose. That's not the motivator. The ego is a function, a critical function, a beautiful function, but it's still just a function to help keep us alive. That's all it does. That's really all it does. Can you sort of see on Maslow's hierarchy how each one of those 5 tiers ultimately is about the temporary experience of satisfaction that comes with safety? Esteem gives us safety. My tribe isn't going to turn on me. Being seen as respectful or having value in my tribe gives me safety because I'm not going to get turned on. Having access to food, clothing, shelter, medicine gives me a temporary sense of safety. Right? But you can feel that all of them are temporary, for one thing. None of them are abiding. None of those 5 tiers are going to be fulfilled for you in 100 years. Even when we have the experience of food, clothing, shelter, medicine, we know that those are finite resources and those are finite states. Someday, all the medicine in the world and the best access that's available on the planet to healthcare systems will not prevent me from dying, nor will it prevent you from dying. All of those things in Maslow's hierarchy are valuable. They should be sought after. They should be freely accessible to every being on the planet. That would be fair. That would be kind. That would be loving. That would be a world. What a wonderful thing that would be. That should be true. It isn't, but it should be. But it is still just the basis. The reason this is so important is because without these, at least to some degree, without these 5, again, he kept calling them values, but these 5 tiers, these 5 values being met to some degree, it's virtually impossible, or at least extremely difficult, to start going beyond them. What is the me beyond my ego life? What is the thing that's worth living for, that's really, really, really big, that's bigger than just those things, bigger than the body, bigger than the self, bigger than belonging, bigger than esteem, right? If you don't have food, I'm not going to teach you about emptiness or non-self. In the Talmud, our Jewish friends say, to the starving man, God can only appear as bread. There is a deep teaching, right? We have to care for these things, these 5 things, these 5 tiers, in the order that they are given to a very large degree, because we can't move beyond them unless they are satisfied, right? So the next time you go to a meditation hall, you're surrounded 95, I'm going to say, percent of the time by people who are safe, have housing security, economic security, educational security, esteem, social belonging, right? All that kind of stuff. These are very, very, very high functioning human beings, high enough so that they're starting to ask questions about, hey, what's bigger than just this? What's more than just my ego and my country and my family and my pride and my sports team and my, the way egos think. In order to even imagine that there's something beyond, in order to even access what we call second half of life or the awakening project, these things have got to be in place, at least to some degree, because what I will be asked to do is slowly but surely to take them back. And again, when we say take them back or die to them, religious scripture is very fond of saying die to ego or die to that small self or die to those needs. What they just mean is to not identify them as you. to see them very clearly as functions to help you stay alive. But that's it. To see with some clarity the life led for just the satisfaction of those 5 things is small and actually kind of sad. Actually, very sad. No self-transcendence. No awestruck wonder. No willingness to leave this small shell to go to a much, much, much bigger place. To leave the house, to stand outside underneath the stars. When we gaze up into the heavens, we can see that, we can feel that that has no name. We can give it names. We can throw names at it, shooting arrows into the dark. I can imagine that's a Buddhist sky or a Christian sky. But if I'm really grounded, I can feel my feet on the earth, feel the spin of the planet underneath me, feel the movement of my breath. I know I'm staring into infinity. I know I'm staring into myself. And I know there are no words for that. And I know that doesn't have an emotional quality. It's way bigger than little words like gratitude or curiosity or wonder. It's much, much, much bigger than all of those things. Those words are important, but they aren't the thing. And in order to see the thing, in order to feel the thing, in order to have the experience of the thing, I had to leave my house. I had to stop being somebody who lives on this block, in this town, in this state, in this country, a member of this religion or race or gender or belief system. To have a genuine spiritual experience, any kind of revelation, any kind of epiphany. I mean, read your scriptures, whatever tradition it is you belong to. Read the scriptures. Somebody woke up. Somebody had an experience that didn't fit into their cultural, into their preconceived notions of self, into their social scripting, into their belonging, all their little rules about what makes a good person, what makes a bad person, and what you're supposed to do at night, and how you're supposed to hold your hands, and what a good wife and mother looks like, what a good husband and father. We're talking about something much, much, much bigger than that. Something that really does just tear down the whole house. Moses, Christ, the Buddha, Muhammad, blessed be his memory. Can you imagine some sort of completely self-annihilating, ego-annihilating experience? The annihilated ego doesn't stay annihilated, it comes back. But for those who really integrate, for actual masters, the ego becomes a prodigal son that's welcomed back and put into correct relationship. I am no longer identified with the needy animal of the body or the needy animal of the ego. I understand what it is. I understand the power of its functioning. And it can serve as it is designed to, the largest parts of me, instead of forcing the largest parts of me to try to serve it. If I'm meditating to become a better salesperson, I'm making something big and vast, something sacred, serve a very, very small part of me. And so at some point, if I stick with it long enough, I will be asked to flip the script. So the good news is that when properly understood, all of our religious traditions, regardless of which one you choose, will give you the tools, give you the myths, gives you the stories, give you the examples of how to sacrifice the ego. Sacrifice just means to make sacred. Sacrifice, sacrament, sacred. It's the same word, sacred. Sacrifice means to make something sacred. To make something sacred, right? We offer a sacrifice on an altar. We put something on an altar. It becomes sacred. We offer something sacred in exchange for something sacred. This is a very basic kind of primal understanding of that word, but you understand what we're talking about, right? I'm offering something sacred, sacrifice. So to make ego sacred is what we're talking about. When ego serves the awakened self, it's sacred functioning. Of course it is. Of course it is. That's what sacrifice the ego means. It doesn't mean kill it. It doesn't mean kill it. That's not helpful to anybody. But to make it sacred, to understand all of its functioning, to understand how it came to be, to understand how it operates. Thank you very much. To honor its function for keeping us alive. Thank you, all 5 tiers of ego. Thank you, body. Thank you, animal. Thank you, mammal. Thank you. Because now something much, much, much larger can happen. Wow. It's in proper relationship. The ego is in proper relationship with us. The ego is in proper relationship to you. Your ego is in proper relationship to you. It is serving you out of great devotion and great love. Not the service offered by somebody whose spirit has been broken, who's been crushed through fear or punishment or puffed up with reward. It's not that kind of thing. It's devotion. That's why we call it devotion, right? So when we use spiritual principles, spiritual teachings, spiritual scripture, for egoic ends, we call that spiritual bypass. I'm getting around what's being actually asked of me, the sacrifice that's actually being asked of me. The thing isn't made sacred yet. I'm forced to use the wisest and best parts of me to serve very small, selfish, fearful parts of me. We're seeing that a lot these days. We've always seen it a lot. There's nothing new. But on the day that I'm giving this talk, in the fall of 2025, there isn't a headline that doesn't seem to feature this: the misappropriation of something sacred to serve the smallest, scaredest, most angry, selfish parts of ego, furthering the ego agenda. We are asked to die to our identification with those functions in order to grow into our true inheritance, our inheritance as spiritual beings. We make the ego sacred through our understanding and our embrace of it, through our correct boundaries with it. When we begin to understand the sacredness of life as a vehicle for consciousness, a vehicle for God, a vehicle for spirit, a vehicle for Buddha, a vehicle for life, we start having a tremendous amount of respect for the form, for the vehicle. You can bow to the light bulb because you know it's a vehicle of light. You can bow to it. You understand what it is. But when it burns out, it's okay to throw it away because your allegiance is to the light, not to the bulb. Your allegiance is to the awakening, not to the vehicle of awakening. Thank you, Maslow. You gave us a wonderful map of the vehicle of awakening, the way the body works, the way the social conditioning of Homo sapiens work, the way the sense of self is created, the way the ego works. Maslow did a great job of this. Western psychology did a great job of this. Eastern psychology, the tradition I was trained in, does a brilliant job of outlining human ego function, how exactly it works, how it attaches, how it pushes away, what it grabs onto, meaning making, narrative creation, ego identification, all of it. It's so important to see how it works. There's nothing wrong with any. I'm studying the light bulb so I can eventually see past it and go, oh, I get it. You're a vehicle for the transcendent thing that we all actually are. Yeah, wow. In my Zen tradition of Soto Zen tradition, Dogen, the great master, said it this way: to carry yourself forward and experience the myriad things is delusion. That the myriad things come forth and experience themselves is awakening. He's talking about the part of us that practices. To carry yourself forward to experience the myriad things, the great mystery, That's delusion. That makes sense, right? Oh, right. I'm still seeing things through the lens of this little self. What can I get from the myriad things? What can I get from the great unfolding? What can I get from the miracle? What can I get from the infinite? Wow. Can you feel? I'm still motivated from that small self. I'm carrying myself forward. We can all be forgiven for this because all of us, without exception, do it. But then he flips it on his head to remind us when the myriad things, when the all, the connection to the great, the expansiveness, the spirit, Buddha, the boundarylessness of existence comes forward and experiences itself. Oh, I experience the small self as a vehicle of what I really am. Oh, that's awakening. To feel all he's doing is to talk about the very, 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 very same practice, just flipped on its head. Can you see it this way? Can you study the self, the little self, from the perspective of understanding it's not really you, it's just a function? Changes everything. It's beautiful. We can affirm it. We can affirm this temporary body and this fleeting human experience. We can affirm our anger. We can affirm our greed. We can affirm our ignorance, not to continue, not to condone, not to identify with, but to affirm it is real, to understand why it's there, to understand it's not separate from the great lotus land, from the heaven that's spread out upon the earth. Oh, this is it. This is the nature of it. I can affirm it. I can participate in it and just not be identified with it. Wow. Thank you again, Maslow. Do you understand the linchpin here is if I'm studying the small self, I must not be the small self. I can't study something that I am. I can only study that which I'm not. Until the great veil is lifted, and then everything is the self, and everything's not the self, and it doesn't matter. But in the meantime, the observing function, the witnessing, the loving witness that we spend so much time on in meditation, so much time on in every contemplative tradition. Learn to watch, learn to watch, learn to watch, learn to watch. Notice the judgment. Notice the greed. Notice the jealousy. Notice the anger. Notice the divisions. Notice the arbitrary longing. Notice the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tiers that Maslow outlines for us so skillfully. Notice the transaction. Notice there's nothing. Don't judge it. Then it shuts down. As soon as we judge, small mind. As soon as we judge, no more curiosity, no more mindfulness, no more growth, no more progress. Everything stops. Everything. As soon as judging starts, everything else stops. That's why it makes perfect sense that one of the first instructions we're given is notice the judge. Notice the judge. Of course you have a judge. It's what ego does. You have an ego. Notice the bend in your elbow. You have an elbow. That's what elbows do. It's not a problem. It's just a function. Notice the judge. Notice the judge. Notice the judge. Notice the judge. Over and over and over. It's a much more helpful instruction. Much more helpful instruction for meditation than don't judge. Why? Don't bend your elbow. It's going to happen. It's an ego function. Learn when it arises. Learn how it arises. Learn how it feels. Learn what it wants. Learn its belief system. Learn how it taught or how it learned what it is now doing. Learn how it was taught to be. Learn it, understand it. You're witnessing it from the outside. You're watching it from a place that isn't it. That's why as soon as you judge, you're not observing it anymore. You are it. You're now no longer the small self advancing. You're that which is watching the small self going, oh, I understand. You're one of the myriad things. Little ego, you're one of the myriad things, just like the tree in my yard, just like the squirrel climbing the tree, just like the bird, just like the cloud, just like the sun, just like the water. You're one of the myriad things. You reflect the sunlight just like all those other things. No separation, not a problem. I can affirm all of it. My teacher's teacher, Katagiri, Roshi said it this way. Life and death are the ornaments of Buddha. One of my favorite sentences. Life and death are the ornaments of Buddha. They're just ornaments. They aren't real in an essential way. Coming in, going out, coming in, going out. The light turns on, the light turns off. It's dark, now it's light. Now it's a squirrel, now it's a tree. Now it's you. Now it's angry, now it wants something. Now it's not. Now the water is ripply, now it's really calm. That's okay. It's ornaments. It's ornaments. It's ornaments. The movements of the ego are ornaments. They aren't who you really are. You're the Buddha underneath all of them. You're the calm center at the center of that swirl. Maslow gave us a brilliant map of the swirl. Always physical needs to be met. Always hungry, thirsty, angry, lonely, tired. Want more, want more, want more, want more. More money, more esteem, more sugar. I want to buy something. I want to go someplace. I want to achieve something. I want to be better. That's okay. Can you see you're just watching it? Of course it's suffering. The endless swirl, cycle of karma, the cycle of fate, the activity of dukkha, we would say in Buddhism. That's okay. The human realm, yep, there it is. Perfect place to practice. Perfect place to practice, the center of the storm. Can you feel that when you're grounded in the center of the storm, you've disavowed? You are not identified with. You can affirm, you can relate to, you can avow from the perspective of, I have something to care for, I have something to love, I have something to understand. It's why at the beginning, when people come to me, they have their meditation and they always say it this way. Maybe I'll end with this. Oh, my meditation's been good lately. I always love hearing them say that. I can hear where they're at. My meditation. It's yours. It's your meditation. Sure. Sure it is. Sure. Sure it is. My God is really nice today. He's very forgiving. My God is very wrathful today. My meditation was very busy. My meditation was really still. My family's really, really meeting my needs. My family's been horrible lately. My girlfriend won't call me back. My boyfriend is so sweet, he didn't forget my birthday. Can you feel it? We're still identified with the weather. That's okay. That's okay. Don't ever think you practice Zazen. Zazen practices Zazen. It's what they say in my tradition. That's a second half of life teaching. That's a pretty advanced teaching. When people are new, we wouldn't expect that to make a lot of sense. That's okay. It will someday. You're not the one who's practicing it. That's not really you. After a while, we're the ones who meet that self, that small self, that thinks it has meditation. And its needs are getting met or not met. And it's grabbing and it's happy and it's sad and it's worried and it's getting old and sick and dying. We end up being identified with the one who meets them on the cushion, off the cushion, in the pew, in the zendo, in the kitchen, in the car, caught in traffic. We're the ones who meet them. Tell me about your experience. Are your needs getting met? Are you sad? What you thinking about? What are you believing? All of it's okay. It's just the weather. Give me the weather report today. Give me the weather report. I can hear the crying in your voice because you're identified with the human experience, and the human experience is one of longing and suffering and grasping and pushing and pulling and very temporary, fleeting experiences. I'm happy to hear you. I'm happy to listen. I'll hear the cry of the world from the cushion. That's the vow. And so Zen is not a self-improvement project. Is it good for you? Yep. Does your ego need to know all this? No, not really. Don't worry about it. Do you get to know all that'll be sacrificed? Yeah. All the hero stories and all of our traditions are about people who sacrifice that part. Will you be true to who you really are? Even if those human needs aren't met? What if you don't get to be wealthy enough? What if you don't get to be famous? What if people start thinking you're weird? What if you lose your connection to your family? What if they don't talk to you anymore? What if you lose your money? Will you even sacrifice your body? Our hero stories are full of. They're usually myths, but they're speaking universal truths. So yeah, I'm disidentified with all those things. You see it in the Buddha story, you see it in the Christ story, you see it in the Muhammad story, you see it in the Moses story. Yeah, of course. As you're more and more true to the deeper parts of who you are, you move further and further and further away from the center of gravity of 90% of the people, 90% of the time. That's why they say the path is lonely. On one level, it is. For our human self, it gets very lonely. Yeah, that's true. And it also isn't, because we're able so easily to keep ourselves company. And it's not a problem to be lonely. The loneliness is just the weather. But at some point, we are asked. At some point, we are required. We really are required to sacrifice our identity with those parts of ourselves. It becomes okay. It doesn't mean fear isn't present. We can all sweat blood in the face of losing our houses of belonging, our ego identity, to lose the esteem and value of our friends or our family systems. That happens. Certainly, what we can say with absolute certainty is all of us end up losing our primary house of belonging, which is the body, our identity as a human, the name that you respond to. In 50 years and 100 years is long forgotten. Stops mattering, stops existing. That's a truth none of us get to avoid. Whether we experience negation and social shame or rejection in this human realm, in this human life as a result of our spiritual practice or not, either way, we do have to face the mortality of the vehicle for consciousness. And so all of us come up against this. And when we have done the work while we are alive, then disidentifying with the bulb that's been a kind enough vehicle for us to hold us for these years, oh, sweet sorrow, but very doable. It's okay. Time to go. The car stopped starting, so we hauled it away to the recycler. The bulb stopped lighting, and so we threw it away. It's okay. The light isn't hurt by that. That's why we do spiritual work. Practicing, disidentifying with all 5 of those tiers. Not a self-improvement project, but a self-love project until it's time for a self-sacrifice project. How beautiful. To make every moment of that vehicle's existence a sacred one.